Podcast. My name is Aaron, and this is Pastor Mark.
Hey.
We are a two-man podcast today. Megan is out, and we could not coerce or convince anyone else to join us.
We tried Bobby, tried Lauren.
We did.
Didn't work out.
Yeah. So we're here. If you are checking us out for the first time, or maybe you just randomly found us, that's totally great. But we are Pursuit Community Church. We're the staff, and we do this podcast as a supplement to what we talk about on the weekends. So it's kind of, maybe debriefing the sermon a little bit more, diving deeper into the pastor's notes and talking about some of those other things that maybe didn't get covered on Sundays. We also periodically talk about a lot of different things and many different rabbit trails that we go down. So yeah, and also we usually say this at the end of the podcast, but I'll throw this in there right now. We love your guys' ideas. And so if there's any comments, questions, you can throw those in the comment section. However, you're checking this out right now. You can also email us at office@pursuitcommunity.church and get in contact with us that way. You can also just talk to us on a Sunday when you see us at church. Share anything you want, but we love to interact with you all as well. So Mark, this was week 3 of our Encounters with Jesus series, and you taught, and we were in the story of Jesus thinning the crowds.
Yeah, not the greatest church growth strategy that the world has ever seen. Right. Yeah, definitely somebody who came out of a church that was pretty hardcore after church growth by any means necessary.
Yeah, there's too many people here. Let's get rid of them, said no church anywhere.
Seriously. And that's exactly what Jesus does.
Yeah.
But you can see that below the surface, there's a really good reason for it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're in this section of John chapter 6 where Jesus is basically teaching on being the bread of life. This is just after he does the miracle feeding the 5,000.
Yeah.
And by the way, that doesn't always come across, the 5,000. It was 5,000 men. Mm-hmm. So the amount of men, women, and children would have been, 3 times as much is a conservative estimate.
Right.
You have to think these are the families that we have in our church, that are 6 kids. And it's every couple months, it's oh, so-and-so just had another baby. Oh, is that number 7?
Right.
These were
yeah.
Back then you would have a lot of kids to help you with
simple math.
Yeah. Right. Doing farm chores and stuff.
Sure.
So thousands. So it was the most amazing moment there where all these people were whoa, this is something special is going on here. And so there was overnight an addition of thousands and thousands of disciples. Mm-hmm. And I maybe air quote disciples, right?
Mm-hmm. So why do you think those people were all following?
You're a weirdo.
Yeah.
No, but it's just from this, if it were today, if I'm going to be what's the word I'm looking for, if I'm going to be cynical, mm-hmm. Today this would be oh, that church, there's a movement at that church, thousands of people, mm-hmm. You should juxtapose this against the thousands of people who come on Pentecost. Pentecost is 3,000 people, mm-hmm. and this is whatever, let's call it 3 times as many, because we really don't know the full amount. But what's crazy is that you have one where you've got people basically joining up to follow Jesus because of literally the bread. Mm-hmm. Literally he feeds everyone. In that moment, they're great, if we keep following Jesus, he'll keep providing us with food. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where the 3,000 that get added in Acts is those are real disciples. This is not necessarily real disciples. We see it because Jesus teaches something hard and they all just run.
Right.
So you can see that they're after something. They're after using Jesus to get the thing that they want, being the vending machine.
Yeah.
I said in my sermon, put the quarter in. It's not 1920. You can't get anything out of a vending machine for a quarter, but I put the change in. I pushed the button.
You swiped your credit card.
Right. Yeah. And then out comes the thing that I want. And I think a lot of people treat God that way.
Yeah.
They start kicking the machine if it's not giving them the thing that they want, and they throw a temper tantrum. And it's but that's not what a relationship with God looks like. Yeah. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to get something from God that he doesn't want to give you, or he wants something else for you. It's like you're the fat kid trying to eat the cupcakes, and he's trying to give you the trail mix, or whatever. Like, he's taking care of it. This is a great illustration. It just keeps
Vegetables.
going
Yeah.
on and on
Yeah.
and on.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like, I think a lot of people do look at God in that way, and Jesus would rather thin the crowd,
Yeah.
like divide the real disciples from the not real disciples. This was another thing I didn't put in the sermon, but I fully believe this. There's been a decline in the church over the past, whatever, let's call it a decade, and people get alarmed, like, hey, the church is um has declined by 10% a year, 20% or whatever, and they look at these numbers. They say there used to be this many Christians, and now there's this many Christians. And part of me understands the fear around that, and thinking
Right.
that things
Yeah.
are whatever. But part of me also thinks that I think just a lot more people are more honest about where they're at.
Yeah.
That, like, we've shed disciples that weren't really disciples.
Yeah.
That they're people that are
disciples in name only.
Yeah.
Dinos.
Is that a real thing? Dinos?
I don't know. Maybe for like a Democrat in name only. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Because I know rhinos. That's another one. For
Right.
Republicans. Yeah. But, like, to me, it's like, I'm okay with that decline if it means that we're still doing the same work, reaching new people, but that we're losing people that really aren't disciples. Like, I do think just people are more honest about where they're at, and they don't feign religion. They don't go through the motions of doing religion when they realize, like, it doesn't really give them a benefit or any kind of, like, extra, in society, it's not looked at as like that's a really
right. Yeah.
good thing anymore. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you do whatever you want. Everyone has respect for each other.
Right.
So the decline of the church and often feels like the thinning of the disciples to me.
Right. And I think, like, we kind of had this conversation last week. We started having it. But essentially, the pandemic has kind of accelerated that process of thinning the church that we like, not pursuit, but like, capital C church, the big church. It's been this thinning of the church in general, of Christianity in general. There's a lot of people that have fallen away from their faith, or maybe just they still think they have it, like personally still have it, but they're not acting, they're not doing anything, they're not attending, they're not whatever. And I think that's kind of the demographic. And it's not up to us to judge whether they are or are not actually a Christian. Like, that's between them and God. But from where we sit and view people that we know or that we used to know or that we see, like, it kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like this thinning of the crowd because of COVID and because of some of these other things that have happened too. One of the aspects of this story that I really appreciate is, you think about the time and place of when this was all happening. Jesus is like, he's really like gathering momentum. I mean, literally gathering his team of disciples, his followers. And it's not like, obviously not like today. There was no Facebook campaign. Like, there's no algorithm to like put Jesus's material in front of like people at the time. This is all like the momentum he's gathering is all spreading through like oral tradition, like people telling these stories, passing them on to their neighbors, their friends,
right,
people down the street. That's where all of those 5,000 to 15,000 people are coming from. Right. They're coming because they've heard like some pretty miraculous, crazy things, and they want to see it firsthand. Yep. And so they show up and they're like, "Oh, free food. It's great." Like, it's kind of like a concert or like an event. Like, this is really great. I can be a part of this. Right.
Right.
And so it just kind of gives this, like, for me, it's always given me this like more rich impression of what that actually meant. It wasn't just the hard lesson. It's like, think about each of those individual 5 to 15,000 people that were there, and for them to each in their own way kind of go, "Ooh, I don't know about that. That's not what I heard. Thanks for the bread, peace." Like, so interesting, such an interesting story. And I think, like you're saying, and you said this on Sunday, like, there's so many correlations between like that group of people and a lot of people now. But if you continue reading, you realize like that message isn't so much for those 15,000 people. It's for the disciples.
Yeah. I mean, it's both.
Yeah.
Because, I was thinking about this too. Like, so we're talking about the decline of the church and then, like, the thinning of these disciples. One of the other reasons why the church is declining now is not just because I think, like, I don't want to call them fake disciples, but like not real disciples are kind of falling off, but also because people aren't as actively going weekly to church anymore. They're going monthly or every other week. If they're
Right.
like, I think like a pretty committed Christian is going to be there like 2 or 3 times in a month. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole different deal.
Yeah.
So like not only, so if we're adding up the people, like it's twice as many people going half as much, and there's disciples that have fallen off. Like I don't worry about the church's momentum, but I think that's what a lot of people point to. I was having this conversation a couple of weeks ago about finances, and we, coming out of April, we hit 99.18% of what he had budgeted for the year. And we were pretty aggressive budgeting. And, you know, the beginning of our year is we go from September 1 to August 31. So beginning part of our year, we're still struggling with COVID. You know, there's still like lack of people coming. And it's like, so we're averaging, once we kind of came out of COVID and kind of came out of Easter, we're averaging like 120, 130 people on a weekend. That's basically what we've been averaging the past like 2 months or so. And it's like, but the amount of people who give to our church is like 100 people more.
Right.
Like, so I can look at the amount of people that give to the church and the amount of people that show up at church. We have tons of people that come or that give and don't even come. You know what I mean? So it's just so weird. And I do think the COVID thing, a lot of people were like, yeah, I kind of like brunch, you know, I kind of like, you know, oh, my kid's got a sniffle, might as well stay home. Like there is a different,
I kind of like sleeping in.
Yeah, right. So I do think though, but when you're in that situation and you're kind of like loosely connected and not really all in, then when you run into a hard teaching, you do one of two things. You like either just sort of ignore that, or you
lean in or you lean out.
You start moving away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard. Like some of the teachings that Jesus in the Bible espouse, like some of the things that were taught, like they don't line up with our culture's norms. And so people are like, well, what am I going to do about this? And you're kind of put to a decision about if you're going to be a real disciple or if you're going to be someone who's just there for what you get out of Jesus. And it just doesn't really do you any good to tack Jesus on, like a part of Jesus onto your viewpoints and norms, your culture, your values, your whatever. It's like we want to just tack Jesus on and have him be like a, you know, an extra piece. And it's like nowadays, like people don't even do that. They just say, I'm out. I'm just not gonna do this anymore.
Do you feel like one of the implications, especially like on like the church side of this story, is that collectively we have just not done a great job of making disciples before crucible moments? Like it feels like collectively we've just fallen into some of these patterns of what some people call it consumer Christianity, some people call it like seeker sensitive attractive ministry, but just I'm being very general here. It feels like
it's a commodity.
Right. If we had done just a little bit better of a job of like helping people understand what it actually means to be a disciple before like a pandemic or before, you know, the housing boom in 2008, like maybe we wouldn't have lost so many people when there's a hard lesson or something like that. Like,
I actually think I mean, yes, like, does the church do a good enough job at creating disciples? No, we can do better.
Yeah.
But also, I think this goes back to a conversation that we've been having for a long time. It's that that idea of being catechized by the things that you are most into.
Yeah.
And just the amount of content in the world is so huge. You know, we were just talking about a friend that I have that is like a legit flat earther, like legit. And it's like, you couldn't have done that 10 years ago. Now that you have access to YouTube videos and podcasts and, you know, like now you have something that you can like arm yourself with and go and like start a conversation with people and like fight for flat earth, you know, which I obviously 100% agree with. Like flat earth is for sure biblical.
I really hope that whoever's listening to this is also watching the video of your face right now.
No, I don't think that person will be listening to this, but it's just funny to think like there's so much content out there that like I think most people are being catechized by something. They're listening to sports podcasts, they're listening to they're watching YouTube videos on like certain things. They're like, I don't even think like people are like watching popular television anymore, especially not on time.
Right. I mean, there's so many different, like, politics is one of those realms, like different, even like down to like the makeup and hair products, like organic culture. Like, does it have to be organic? Like DIY culture is another one where like you're just making things and working on your house. None of these things are necessarily bad, but like if you're letting them disciple you more than the Bible or your church,
and I'm not even like telling you that you've got to like
give those things up.
Hey man, you need the more of the Bible in your life. Like, it's probably true. But like, people just aren't as serious about their faith. They're just consuming other things that are forming them. And so as far as discipleship goes, they're not really growing in what it means to be a disciple. They're kind of stuck in that immature version where, Paul talks about like, hey, you guys are like, I can't even give you meat. Like, I have to continue to feed you milk because you're not even mature enough to understand. And that was like before there was like any electronics. Like, what in the world? And now it's like we're catechizing ourselves every day with other things.
Right.
And Jesus is on the back burner until Sunday. And then maybe for 3 hours, he's on the front burner. And then we go home and we continue to catechize ourselves with all these other things. And like, yeah, you're not going to be a mature disciple if that's what you do.
Right. I think I kind of like realized this in a very real way. This is probably like 10 years ago or so, but I was working at church and it was a Sunday morning, and I can't remember who I was with. I probably was with Jess or something. And we were talking, and I was looking for like a family, like who had kids in the youth group, and they weren't there that Sunday. And then I kind of started like in my head thinking like how long it had been since I'd seen them. And it had been like weeks, like maybe a month. I'm not sure. And I remember thinking like, I grew up in a church, and this is now all like 25 plus years in the rearview mirror. So who knows how accurate these memories are, but like, I had this moment where I was like, man, the church I grew up in, like you just expected everyone to be there pretty much every week.
Right.
Like if someone wasn't there, it's because they were sick or they were on vacation.
Or they're backslidden. They're a backslider.
Or right. It was a big deal if like there was like multiple weeks in a row, like, oh my gosh, did the Johnsons leave?
Yeah, right.
Are they gone? Like a different church? Like it's a big deal. And now, like, kind of what you're saying, this conversation is about is, it is not odd to not see someone for like 2 or 3
months.
Weeks. Right.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
and just a short little disclaimer, we get it. People are busy, work, jobs, vacations, illnesses. We're not necessarily judging you. We're being very general. Mark is judging you really hard.
That was for the people watching.
Gotcha.
Don't tell them what I'm doing.
I am the pastor of empathy here.
I'm the pastor of empathy. We needed to hire one because it's great.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, we get it. Sure. But fight for that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like people don't fight for it. It's like, if everything's perfect, then we'll be there.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way. Like, yeah, I've got kids. They get sick. We've got vacations. Like, we do things.
Yeah.
But like, our family, we 100% agree and know that like, come, 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, we're there. We're there. We're doing it.
Yeah.
We're there.
Yeah.
We're there every chance we get. Now, I know I'm the pastor, so like, it is part of my job description as well. So I get it. You're probably like rolling your eyes at me right now, but I just wish people would fight for this more.
Right.
It just feels like, oh yeah, we just, so-and-so's got a sniffle and we can't. It's like, great. Okay. So one parent stays home with that kid and the rest of the family goes.
Right.
Like they're like, nope, nobody can go. Nope, you can't go. Like, no, I feel like people are looking for ways to, not.
Right.
As opposed to being.
Right.
And by the way, church is not the end all be all of discipleship. I would be just as excited if someone was like, I really need to find a way to have the Bible in my everyday.
Yeah.
Whether I'm listening to it, reading it, interacting with it, listening to a podcast, listening to checking out a YouTube video, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if we were catechizing ourselves, if you're like wondering what that word means, just like forming our identity, like if we were forming our identity around the Bible and around Jesus's teachings more frequently, then we wouldn't be immature disciples. It's interesting because like I'm building the DLT, the boy, that means nothing to anyone.
Is that a sandwich? What is that?
The directional leadership team that we have, essentially our version of an elder board.
Okay.
And I've got a list of people I've been thinking about, praying about, like who we're going to invite onto this board. And,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that just are not mature enough to qualify. They're just consistent in our church. They've got servant heart. They're great, but they just don't qualify to be on a leadership team. They're not mature enough. You think like after 3 years in church, like you'd be mature enough. Like you think
Right.
after 10 years, 20 years of being a Christian, you'd be mature enough. But I just don't think people are taking their discipleship very seriously. They're allowing other things to form who they are.
One thing I always have wished about this story specifically is like, Jesus gives the lesson and it just says like people, like a lot of followers left. I wish it would have like highlighted like one who was like, hey, I'll stay. Like, to like maybe show like what that process looked like or
Sure.
what they were thinking or their lines of questions or things like that. But it instantly goes to like Jesus talking to the disciples. And it's not even the disciples being like, hey, tell us more about this lesson. They're more like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you just scared everyone away. Like, I don't know. I think it's like so many things.
Yeah, 66. From this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him.
Yeah.
And then Jesus says to his disciples, you do not want to leave too, do you? Almost like he was
goading them into
No, I was as I read this, I always think like he was almost disappointed that so many people left.
Yeah.
Not that he wasn't okay with those people leaving, but almost disappointed that that's what they chose.
Almost like he drew a line in the sand and he was hoping more people would come across.
Yes. I mean, I can't step back and say he didn't know what he was doing and they didn't understand what was going to happen, but it's almost like it was still like kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of to them like, you guys going to go too?
Yeah.
And it's like more people should have seen that he has the words of life, as Peter says here in this next section. Like he is worth following. He does have the only thing you're looking for. Like there's only one way to find the thing you're looking for, and it's through him. Like I think the disciples knew that, and they were almost bummed out when they answered the question. He's like, "Are you guys going to go too?" And they're like, "Where would we go? Where are we going to go? We've seen you do the craziest stuff. We can't leave."
Right.
Like we know
that, or they're just losers and they really don't have anywhere else to go.
No, they've seen him do banana. Like he walked out on the water of their boat just before this section.
Right. Yeah.
And they were like, okay, well, if I was on the fence, I'm not on it anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so it does feel like when there's a point where it comes where it's like, okay, I'm all in with Jesus, no matter what he asked me to do, no matter what the teaching is, no matter what, and I'll figure it out. So even if it means that like there's a hard teaching that I don't necessarily like line up with, I'm going to find a way to be obedient and follow Christ, even when his teachings come into contrast with my values that I've picked up over, through our culture or through my personal decisions on what I'm going to do, that those things will, if they come into contrast, I will follow Christ.
Yeah.
Even though,
yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of just wish it would have talked about that part of it. Cause I think like and then
thing, Ed decided to stay anyways. It's like, he's like, I'll eat his body.
Ricardo's still there.
I mean, I was hoping for bread, but I guess I'll eat his flesh, like
I'm down.
Are we cooking this or what? Gotta eat it raw. I don't like sushi.
Oh my goodness. He's like, oh wait, you weren't actually being literal. Oh,
cool. It is really funny. We talked about
here
this morning, like how all these characters seem to be taking everything literal. Like it is really funny. Like first century Jews are terrible with sarcasm.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And we'll see that.
We were talking about Nicodemus.
On Sunday,
like, what am I supposed to do? Climb back up in mother's womb? How am I supposed to be born again?
That's just not possible.
Right. Jesus is
like, dude, chill. I'm not
sarcasm, bro. Sarcasm.
Right. I also think too, like maybe this story in general is, I think, very counter, like the identity that a lot of people have of Jesus, who's like, he'll leave the 99 to go fight for the one, to go find the one. And it's like, actually in this story, he's like, get out of here. 5 to 15,000. I'm cool with these.
Sure.
66. Like, because it almost feels like Jesus should be like, he's on the mic giving the hard lesson, and then he kind of like pulls this aside. And he's like, actually, guys, just wait. It gets better. Like, don't leave. I still want you here.
Right.
It doesn't say that. Like, so interesting too, that just to think that like with all of the grace and love that God and Jesus have for humanity, and he's willing to sacrifice everything, like he's not going to go chase after you. Like he
Right.
still presents you through free will with a choice to follow or not. And so that in and of itself is a real hard lesson to to embrace.
It's a challenge because, like, here's what I worry about a little bit. It's like, I think there are people out there that say, yeah, I'm a disciple. Like I am.
Mhm.
And then, like they're presented with a hard teaching, or they're presented with, Jesus calling them to something, and they make a decision not to do that thing, or not to do the next thing, or the next thing. And there's just like slippery slope towards being very far away from Jesus, but like still thinking that you're, honoring and following Christ. And to me, it's like he makes it such a strong, like, commitment level and such strong words, and, kind of puts the decision to them to point out the fact, or at least so they'll know. Because it is very loving for him to point out the idea that, like, you really are not a disciple.
Yeah.
And we do a disservice to people when we make them feel like a disciple
Mhm.
when they're way out of alignment with who Jesus has called us to be.
Mhm.
Like, sometimes you have to call that out, and sometimes you have to put somebody to a decision, and you have to make them understand that, like, they aren't really following Jesus.
Yeah.
They're just going through the motions of some sort of religious system,
Right.
or they're just trying to, I don't know why people will go to church if they're not following Christ, because it's some sort of nostalgic thing from their youth, or they're like trying to honor their, parents or grandparents, or, it's just something that brings them comfort in some way. Like, but like, there is a rubber meets the road moment where it's like, are you going to do what Christ has called you to do, or are you going to do what you want? Like, that makes you the disciple that is not what Jesus is looking for.
Right. And this is such a youth ministry thing too that I'm about to say, but like, my youth ministry heart is like, when I was in student ministry, I would start interacting with most of my students like at some point in junior high, and then if I was lucky, I get to see them all the way through.
Yeah.
And I just gotta, like, your hope as a youth leader, as a youth worker, is you're like, man, I just hope that like something sticks. Like I hope they get it. There's some sort of a heart change, something that carries them into adulthood, and then they have some sort of lasting faith that comes out of that somehow. I'm not responsible for it, but that's my hope and my dream.
Right.
Part of me is like thinking about this group of people, that 5 to 15,000. I'm like, man, did Jesus like pull the trigger too early? Like if they were able to stay with them for like another week, maybe would half of them been like, hey, it's a tough lesson, but I'm still cool. Like I'll stay. Like, oh, it's just so tough. It's like, these are the questions I have where I'm like, man, when I get to heaven, like I want to sit and talk with Jesus for a little bit and be like, so why? Like, I mean, we know why. Like he didn't want to create a movement. We know all of these things now, hindsight. But I just think like, if they would have even had like one more person that would have stayed and been a disciple, or been like someone to carry that torch after Jesus died and like gone, resurrected and ascended to heaven. Like, I don't know. I just think about these things all the time. Like God's got all of it and he's got a plan, and we're not in control of it. We're just like workers doing the best we can,
Well, it does say many of his disciples turned back.
Yeah.
And no longer followed him. I think the rest of them probably stayed put where they lived.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't follow him around, but it doesn't mean they stopped following him.
Right. So like when Forrest Gump is like done running, he's like, I think I'll go home now. It's kind of like that.
I don't know. You sure? I can barely remember Forrest Gump.
So this part where he's like running across country,
Yeah.
After Jenny breaks his heart. And then like, as he's running, all these people start following him. So like, by the time he decides he's done running, he's got like a group of like hundreds and hundreds of people following him. And so like,
and they don't really know why they're following.
No, they're just running because it's the thing. And then
why are you doing this? Oh no.
Yeah. I like running. Yeah. And then he's like, I think I'll go home now. And then like, you hear one guy in like the background go like, no, what are we gonna do? Like, is it that? Is it kind of like that?
No, I just think there were probably some disciples that continue to follow him, but they just followed him in Galilee. Like they just followed him in the region that he was in, right? So Capernaum. It's not like the most devastating thing in the world. It's also not like those people couldn't continue to teach about Jesus and continue to encourage people to follow Jesus. Right. Like, God's got a plan, and that was part of it. And
Yeah.
Jesus knows what they were thinking. There's a moment where he responds and like he sees them grumbling, and he's like, "Hey, like I know what you're talking about. Like
Yeah.
I know dummy."
Can you imagine that? Like one of them, like after this goes home and they're like, Greg, where have you been? Like it's been weeks. And he's like, yeah, I found this dude. I thought he was pretty cool, but they told me to like eat him.
Yeah,
So,
turns out it was cannibalism.
Yeah.
I know. Joke's on me. He pulled back the curtain, and I was supposed to be a cannibal.
Well, glad you're home. Yeah, good to be back.
So yeah, so to me, the issue of discipleship is there, and then there's the famous sort of lesson that he's teaching them is that he's the bread of life.
Yeah.
And we talked about the idea of life, that there's different words for life. There's bios, which gives us the word biology, and biodome. I made my Pauly Shore reference.
Oh my gosh, you were speaking to my heart. Like Pauly Shore is such a big part of my adolescence.
Only people about 40 are like understand what we're talking about.
Encino Man in the Army now?
Yeah.
Come on.
Like a 34-year-old is going, who are they talking about? They're probably getting Pauly Shore and Carrot Top mixed up in their head.
Oh, I hope not.
So
is Pauly Shore still alive?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? It's been a while.
Oh man.
So the idea that like bios means life, but that's not the word that Jesus was using. He was using the word Zoe.
Yeah.
Or Zoe, that's be the way that we use it for a name. And then Zoe is like this quality of life, this type of life. And, this correlates perfectly with John 10:10, I believe. John 10:10, where Jesus basically is like, I came so that you could have life and life to the full. Like I want you to have like the fullest possible life, not just like any life. I want you to have the life that's meaningful and, is incredible. And I'm not here just to make sure you exist. I'm here to give you purpose, right? Like, that's also the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that you have life to the full, right?
I'm trying to find it. Sorry.
I mean, it's off the top of my head, but pretty sure I'm right. So, and then I was one thing I didn't make it into the sermon was just this idea that like I think a lot of people chase after spoiled bread. They chase after a form of Zoe, but it's not really Zoe. And like there's a ton of things that could sort of fall into that category. Like at the end of the day, are you really chasing like your career or success in the workplace, or are you chasing money, or are you chasing status? Are you chasing your sort of validating your own existence through your children? You're chasing the American dream, health. If that's all that you care about is like health and wealth, and just having like no bad things in your life at all. I do think there's a lot of people that will chase after spoiled bread, and it was interesting. I was listening to somebody talk about this at one point, and they were like, we could have a bunch of people at a church stand up and give a testimony about how Jesus has changed their life and how the Holy Spirit has changed their life. But, we could also have a bunch of people get up and talk about how they chase after, success or money or sex or, power, or again, validation through your children or the American dream. And they would tell you that it was rotten. That like when they finally got what they were looking for or got close to what they were looking for, that it didn't satisfy.
Yeah.
And this is the idea that Jesus gives us. There's one type of bread that satisfies. That's it.
Yeah.
It's the life that he wants us to live. It's the Zoe.
So 10:10 says, John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And 11 says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's then one of the I am statements. This was I am the bread of life. That's the I am. They could do a whole sermon series on just those 7 I ams. It'd be like a 7-week.
Right.
It'd be cool.
Yeah.
But so this idea
coming in 2024.
Yes, not 2023. I think we're pretty planned out there. But so to me, there is a conversation about, are you chasing after the real like bread of life, the real Zoe, or some sort of spoiled version of bread? It's not going to satisfy. It's not going to get you where you want to go, and I didn't necessarily have time to ask that question or like dive into that deep enough because I think I was around 40, and it's just like, I could keep throwing stuff into the sermon, but we're just going to keep getting longer.
Right.
So
I think it's hard though I'm sure you've known people like this. I've known people, individuals and families, couples where they have reached some sort of success, not just financially or career wise, but they have they have the dream house, you know, they have the lifestyle they want or whatever it is, you know.
Mhm.
And some of those people, they have a really hard time like reconciling, like, I love Jesus, you know, but there's this other big part of my life that requires a lot of my time, a lot of my attention. Like, can't help but be catechized by that thing.
Yep.
And yet I still love God. It's a big part of my life too. I've always like just felt bad for people that experience that tension. It's really tough, you know?
And if you're like, I don't know if I have these idols in my life, or I don't know if I'm chasing after spoiled bread, then my question is always the same. Show me your calendar and show me your checkbook.
Mhm.
Like, you spend the time on the things that matter the most to you. You spend the money on the things that matter the most to you.
Mhm.
This is why, I
Then I'm probably being catechized by fast food and coffee. That's probably.
Well, I had this conversation with like this other pastor, and he was like, "Yeah, we're having some financial troubles," and he's like, "I just need one really wealthy person to come to our church." To which I said, "No, wealthy people are always the least generous people." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, often wealthy people, what they give is significantly lower than a lot of very generous people in your church, because to be honest with you, they're trying to serve money and Jesus at the same time,
Right.
and to give a percentage that like a normal blue collar person would give who's very generous would be so much money that it would be like a ridiculous thing in their head. And so percentage wise, they're like very not generous compared to what a lot of people. So like if you would talk
Mhm.
to them about a tithe, it'd be like crazy. Like you make $1 million a year and you're like, yeah, maybe Jesus is calling you to tithe. They'd be like $100,000.
Right.
Like, but there are tons of people who make 50 grand a year who give $5,000 to the church.
Yeah.
Like they tithe. So like, I do think that, show me your checkbook, show me your,
Mhm.
your calendar, and I can tell you what your idols are. It's
Mhm.
pretty easy. You spend your time doing this, you spend your money doing that. And it's like, where does God fit into this equation? It's pretty easy to see what is the priority or the idol
Mhm.
in that person's life. And that's not a fun thing to preach.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like people get real squirmy. They
Yeah.
all of a sudden got to go to the bathroom and
Yeah.
need to take a walk. My back's starting to hurt, like
Right.
so. And then the last thing I thought was kind of interesting is that like we just need to be careful. We've talked about this quite a bit, but like church growth, it's not always up and to the right. There are plenty of pastors who would take a moment, like adding that many people to their following, to their movement.
Mhm.
God, look what God's doing. We got 15,000 people coming now. We got to find a way to keep feeding these people. We got to find a way to. And there's churches out there. There's one particular in our area that's like they give away free stuff all the time just to get people to come try their church out. It's like freestatefairticket.com, free Cane's meal for the youth group,
Yeah.
.com, like free Chick-fil-A sandwich.com, free, whatever. And it's like, if you start that way, then you have to continue down that path. If you start with, let me see if I can create a situation where the masses want to show up for a thing that I can give them, then that's what discipleship looks like in the future. You got to keep giving people stuff. You got to keep
Yeah.
going above and beyond whatever the last thing you did was.
Yeah.
100,000 Easter eggs. Like there was one church I know of. They did like they gave away 7 flat screen TVs on Super Bowl Sunday. I was like, why 7? Like, it's like a
Biblical number.
Yeah, biblical number. Like that's the number of completion. I was like, guys, this is ridiculous. Like you guys
It's
are.
the number of TVs God wanted us
And
to
they
give
went
away.
around like Publishers Clearinghouse. And they like knocked on people's doors on Super Bowl Sunday and like handed out like 70-inch TVs to the people who had won.
Right. Yeah.
Which, by the way, have you heard that Publishers Clearinghouse might be like a Mandela effect kind of thing? That like, who's the guy from Publishers Clearinghouse? Ed McMahon.
Yeah.
That like he never showed up at anyone's house with a big check and like told them that they won. Like even though we have this memory of Ed McMahon going. By the way, 35-year-olds are like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
That it might be a Mandela effect thing, that he actually never went and gave out big checks at anyone's house.
Was he the spokesperson for it though?
Yeah. So like it's a weird Mandela effect thing where you have a memory of Ed McMahon holding a giant check on someone's porch, and turns out it was never him. Anyways,
So we should call it like Gospel Clearinghouse. Is that what we
yeah,
should?
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they do with these TVs. They
I
show up
know.
at people's
Yeah.
houses like, you want a TV, and it's like,
I'll be a Christian for a TV.
yeah, or like, we are sort of Oprahizing our churches, like, and you get a thing, and you get a thing,
Yeah.
and look under your seat, there's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that doesn't create disciples.
No.
It, almost never creates the disciples that Jesus wants.
Yeah.
So like, it's great that Jesus took care of a felt need, a physical need, but like, we know this in teaching, that there's a hierarchy of needs, and if you don't feed someone who's hungry, they're not going to listen to what you have to say. So Jesus takes care of a physical need and then teaches them, and some of them are there the next day just to get that physical need cared for again, but missing out on the what's the point of this whole thing. So like, sometimes the movement that you begin is begun in a way that creates false disciples and doesn't really lead where you want to go. And there will be plenty of churches that would be like, great, we're going to take advantage of this, we're going to try to get notoriety from it. And Jesus makes it real clear that filling your church with false disciples is not the way to go. Right.
Maybe the hope is that, like, for those people that were with Jesus and then were thinned and went home, the Gregs of the world,
Ed,
the Todds, the ancient Hebrew Todd, maybe like just being there and being fed planted a seed, maybe, and maybe at some point in the future they came back or re-interacted with their faith or something. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm not endorsing the TV idea in any way, shape, or form. I think that cheapens, the gospel in such a way that, why would you even, if you get a free TV, why would you even want to go back?
We come out of the youth ministry world where this like bait and switch thing was happening all the time.
Oh, totally.
Like, he'd be like, come to our all-nighter, and then it's like, okay, now sit down and hear about Jesus. And it's like, wait, you just said it was going to be a fun evening. Like, you didn't tell me there was some sort of like, you're coming to a church. What did you think it was going to be?
I thought we were just going to the water park of
right.
America.
So I was always really clear about my like, my like messaging.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, come, we got bounce houses. We're doing this all-nighter thing. We're going to go bowling, and there's going to be a message about Jesus. Like, just tell people, just make it clear. And, then also it's like, it's okay if not everybody stays and joins your youth ministry. Again, you're trying to add the right kind of disciples over time.
Right.
Like, so you're giving them an option. You're hoping that they decide to join and be part of it.
Right.
But that movement to take advantage of all those extra people, that's not what Jesus did. He didn't go, great, we got 15. Let's keep going until we get to 50. And there wasn't like articles published about him, like fastest growing, rabbi, can you see this in the church world, like happening?
Yes.
Like, it would be like the biggest thing.
I follow some of those churches on Instagram and I hear about it all the time.
Yep.
And I cringe. It makes me sad. Yeah.
So the church growth strategy is like, it's gotta be the right time for something like that. Like, it does happen in Acts, and it is overwhelming, and it is a movement, and it does start something where 3,000 people are added to their number in a day, and it gives them all kinds of problems that they have to solve and a lot of issues that they've got to overcome. But that's doing it in the right way.
Yeah.
Like, that's a movement of God in that moment that is at the right time. It's, and so I guess just understanding like what created these disciples and are they real disciples is what you have to think about when you're thinking about these church growth kind of situations. So, I pray that our church continues to grow. I would even be overwhelmed if it grew significantly at one time over like a short period. I would definitely be interested in solving the problems that come along with that. But also, that is not the end all be all.
No.
And I want to make sure we are creating the right kinds of disciples, not just having people who are there for whatever.
Right. And I think one of the temptations here is just to villainize growth. Like, if any growth is happening, that's a bad thing.
Right.
Run away from that. That's not the case. I mean, you just said this, but it's like, if Pursuit were to grow by 10% over the next year, that'd be great. It'd be great because that means more people who are hearing the gospel. It means more people who are embracing the mission of Jesus and carrying that into the world, into their worlds, their workplaces, their families, their extended families, their friendships, their relationships. It also means, like, if more people give, then there's more resources to do more things. But at the same time, it's like, I think the trap that a lot of churches have fallen into in some way is growth becomes the thing,
right?
Or it gets elevated to a point where maybe it's just below Jesus, and it's like
up and to the right,
right? And that doesn't do any good.
No.
growth does not automatically equal good.
Right.
It can equal actually a lot
Also,
of ways bad.
think about this: that first church in Acts, there's 3,000 people added to their number. Those 3,000 people, a lot of them are from out of town. They go home, kind of take Jesus with them wherever they go, wherever they're going back home. The church then goes through a short time, and then it's persecuted and spread out throughout the whole way. So, like, even the church growth strategy in that moment does not lead to up and to the right. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's up and down and up and down. Like, we're being persecuted, we're okay. We're being persecuted, we're okay. That's how it goes. Like, that's what it means to be a disciple. There's a lot happening that you are continuing to ride out and figure out and work on.
Yeah.
I just think, like, if you're somebody who's like, well, bumped into something I don't love about Jesus, I'm out, then you weren't the disciple that, Jesus intended.
Yeah. Or that he wants. Yeah. Yeah. Well, any other thoughts?
No, that's pretty much what I had. I
Yeah.
mean, I had some notes written down. I'm sure this would have been a way better podcast if Megan was here to
It
keep
would
us
have
straight.
been infinitely better. Yeah. I'm serious.
We're boring.
Or we
make all these
sidetracked.
We make all these references that no one knows
about. Yeah. Yes, we do. Because we're pastors and because we're old. It's the truth. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We always appreciate the audience, and we are planning on being back next week. Got a great message this Sunday talking about Nicodemus, and we've got a lot of great things coming up here soon. So, like we said at the top, check us out. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want us to spend time talking about, let us know. We'd love to dive into those things as well.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we love you guys and hope you have a great week.
All right. Take it easy.
See ya.